Morning, everybody. How we doing today? It's a chilly day here in Minnesota. It hit negative degrees last night. By that I mean like 32, 31. I had an idea for a little series I'm going to start, and we'll see how it goes. It's not to say we're not going to keep doing 2x2s because those are fun, easy to do. The longer series seem to lose people's interest after a stretch, so I'm going to try not to do too much of that kind of stuff, at least for a little bit, you know. What we're going to do today is something called T2T, tough to find, T2F, sorry, tough to find. And these are going to be records that were tough for me to find, and different factors go into making a record hard to find. Of course, demand and supply are the various factors and various different ways of looking at that. But to start off with, this was my holy grail. I've talked about it a couple times, so I'm not going to go in depth on this one. But Pinky Winter's Argo was the one record of the first 100 I just couldn't get my hands on. The 600 series, this is number 604. And I'm a completist, and once I abandoned completing the artists, I started completing the labels. And for those of you who know me, I have a lot of the major labels either complete or near complete, and for the most part I have the early sequences of almost all those labels fairly filled in, if not completely filled in. Some of the labels that run over a decade, I'll start to have less of their releases later on, like Prestige. Once you get into 74, 7500s, it becomes more sporadic. But the first 400, 7000 series, I have almost all of them. And the first 300, I have all of them. So that's kind of how my mind operates. You get to learn to know something. But you also start to find out which titles in a label's discography are tough to come by, which ones haven't been reissued. One of these we're going to discover here really quickly is that Blue Note is not the domain of tough to find records. Originals, of course, are tough to find. And a lot of them are in Japan. Some of them are even in Europe. But Blue Note's been reissued so many different ways that really there's not a lot of Blue Note titles that were that hard to come by. You search long enough on Discogs or on eBay, and I bought my Blue Notes back in 06, 07, 08, 09. I had some before that, of course, but I really started filling that in 10, 12 years ago. So what I know now of Blue Note probably has changed some, but there's Tone Poets, now there's the Music Matters series, plus the Japanese stuff, plus the United Artists, plus the Liberty, plus the Scorpio. So Blue Note's had a lot of representation in the European, Japanese, and American reissue markets, making almost every title in the 1500 series, 4000, 41, 42, up to 42, 72 the sale. Those titles are almost all out there in multiple versions and can be found for various different price points. And it comes down to which version are you searching for and how much do you want to pay. And that, of course, is going to be a factor on all things here. But by the way, listening to a record that's not that hard to find, just why do my opening monologue here. This is Curtis Amy record on Pacific. It's one of my favorite Pacific albums. It's just a lot of fun. Carmel Jones is on it. Bobby Hutcherson's on it. Frank Butler's on the drums. Great stuff. We're going to start off with a weird record here. It's not what I anticipate many people here are going to be like, oh, I need to go and get that. Although I'm guessing there's a few, looking at you, Jean, who's going to be excited to hear this. This is Lou Waters and Bob Helm. And this is Riverside number 213. And boy, did I search for this title a long time. And not only was I having a hard time finding it, you know a record's rare when you go to seek it on Discogs and it's not even listed as one of the releases. There was a 10-inch version of some of this earlier. That was on Discogs. And of course I ended up buying it. That's the 10-inch version of the Lou Waters stuff. The Bob Helm stuff, it's Dixieland, it's tradition stuff, which of course Growler and Keep News were a big proponent of. In the 50s especially, going into the 60s, they were really a part of that Dixieland revival. But being the completist I was, and having 200 through 299, missing number 213 was unacceptable. And even getting that 10-inch and kind of halfway highlighting it in my book, knowing it wasn't the actual 12-inch number 213 with the right cover art. It just never felt quite like I had it, no matter what. And so it kind of bothered me. And I looked and I looked. It was hard to even come by one. Finally, one pops up on eBay for $150. And that's part of the confusion here when it comes to rare versus demand. I had known this cover from seeing it in record stores over the years before I was looking for it. I remember seeing it plenty. It's a pretty, sticks out in your mind, the covers, the San Francisco theme. I'd seen it numerous times, going back into the 90s. Of course, when I'm looking for it, I can't find it. But I knew that it was, when I did see it, it was under $10. So paying $150 for it was just not going to happen. But some sellers don't know. They see how rare it is, and they think, I'm just going to put it at this ridiculous price. I reached out to them and said, it's New Orleans Dixieland tradition stuff. There's not a lot of demand for it. Would you be willing to part with it for, say, $40, $50, $60? And the guy had no interest in selling it to me for that. So I had to put the desires aside and say, I'm not going to buy that one. And I would say maybe 5 months later, I searched again, and there was one for $18. And it was a make an offer, $18. I made a guy an offer of $12, and he jumped at it. So I got the record for $16 with shipping that I've been looking for years, that I almost spent $50, $60 for, and I didn't. But again, rare could be from several different vantage points. It's a fun record. Jean Mathieu in Quebec. I think you'd dig this stuff. It's fun. It jumps around. It's got a lot of energy, a lot of bright, brilliant sounds and colors. A record I found fairly recently, but it also was very hard for me to come by, and it's not an easy record to find at all, is this Illinois Jacquet Verve session. And I believe it was originally on Clef, then issued on Verve, and it's a great record. It's cooking, it's filled with that great Texas tenor sound. One thing with the Waters record, it has the original Riverside logo that, of course, most of the OJCs got, but they only use that for very early in the 12-inch series. So it's kind of misleading when you buy all the OJC Riverside stuff. But this record's fantastic. Jacquet's just a giant. Covered him, of course, in my saxophone series, the top 100 black saxophone players in jazz, and he's in the top 10. He's super influential. He worked with a lot of people. His style, sound, influence, it's right in the Coleman Hawkins, Ben Webster lineage, right in the guys like Dexter Gordon and Sonny Rollins. Illinois Jacquet's a big, big part of the blues, R&B, tinged sounding jazz, and he puts a lot of soul, a lot of intensity and sincerity. Look at his face. He's not playing. War's being waged. A record that took me longer to find than I thought it would was this Jazz Modes record, and it's actually the first album ever issued on the Dawn label. And I came across the Jazz Modes through Charlie Rouse and Julius Watkins, and I got their first two records here on Dawn rather quickly. I found them. But this first one, which only half of it is actually Jazz Modes, the other half is shared with another artist who I have to look at real quick here. It was shared with Gene Quill, Dick Sherman, Dick Katz, O.C. Johnson, and Teddy Kotick, and then the jazz modes are on the other side. The Dawn label is outstanding. This is number 1101. It's the first album they made. It was a subsidiary of the Seco label, which was a pop bubblegum label almost. But they do some serious jazz stuff, and they have great art departments. The Dawn album covers are outstanding. Beautiful, timeless look. Jazzville 56. There's a number of records in that Jazzville series on Dawn, all worth having. This is just outstanding stuff. Rouse is in great form. Julius Watkins with that French horn gives it some interesting shadings. Dawn records are fun, worth owning, worth looking for, and this one took me a while to track down. and I finally found one for probably 25, 30 bucks. And that's part of the negotiation process you have to go through, is there might be a copy out there somewhere for 200, but you know that copy's not for you. You know, that's part of what you have to decide as a collector, especially if you're going for volume like I am. I'm not just trying to collect 40 records I love and shut my knowledge off at that point. I am trying to dig as deep as I can into the history of the music. So I want volume. I want to have a lot of the elements of the labels and know the history. And so that means I'm not going to spend too much on any one title. A label I talk about plenty, I haven't talked about them as much recently, is the great Bethlehem label. And I got into the Bethlehem BCP series and the 6000 series. I collected a lot of that stuff. And as I neared completing those two set series, I realized there was a lot of 10-inch stuff that wasn't covered in the BCP series. Some of the BCP series did cover the 10-inch material, but there was a lot of 10-inch material that was put out in 53, 54 by Bethlehem that didn't get reissued on anything else. And to further complicate the issue, the covers were outstanding. A lot of 10-inch album covers by labels had pretty thrown together album covers. The 78 RPM era didn't really have album art. There were just those brown sleeves. So the 10-inch album introduced album art. And most labels were, if you look at old Prestige or the first few Roos 10 inches, it looks more like a supermarket advertisement. Like it's just laid out like a billboard or a poster or advertisement. They're not really art. And then they hired Burt Goldblatt, and he, along with David Stone Martin at Verve and Clef, and of course Reed Miles and Blue Note, really kind of reinvent what album covers look like. And jazz sets the standard. Rock doesn't exist yet. All the other forms of music that we think of as modern and part of the canon of the modern 20th century music, jazz was leading the attack, leading the battle. And Burt Goldblatt and Bethlehem starts off the whole thing with some of the greatest album covers ever on their 10-inch series. They're fantastic. I've shared this before, but one of the other labels, I think it was about Bob Weinstock, asked him, Gus Wilde from Bethlehem, were you trying to create a photographic still industry as well as a record industry? Like, you're trying to sell the covers? And in effect, they were. They really drew me in. They made me want to have all of them. And as I started digging into all of them, some were much tougher to come by than others. And as I do this series going forward, the T2F series, Tough to Find, I'll probably delve into more of the Bethlehem stuff that was tough to come by. Some of them are really out there and really rare. The demand's pretty minimal for all of them. There's not a lot of people going, I need to have all those records. They're fairly in between the cracks, but they're outstanding music as well as art. This is Russ Garcia, Wigville. It's probably one of the last 5 I found. What a great cover that is. You know, it just speaks of a wonderful time and era, going back to the robber barons and the train commodores. This, of course, Russ Garcia character is a band leader, and he leads a couple of great band sessions at Bethlehem, and he recruits the creme de la creme of the white jazz musicians at the time. If you listen to this lineup here, Russ Cheever on soprano, Charlie Mariano on alto, Bill Holman's on the tenor, Jimmy Joffrey's on the baritone, Pete Condoli and Conti Condoli on the trumpets, Max Bennett on bass, and Stan Levy's on the drums. That's all jazz royalty. Those are some of the baddest white cats to ever play this music. The white cats that threw down were those West Coast young kids that really were hearing the aggression of the East Coast hard bop. They felt Parker and they felt bebop, but they also felt that new aggressive hard bop. And they were playing it with the same velocity, the same intensity. The only thing lacking on some level is the emotional charge that the black musicians had to express. But these white cats were serious cats. This Russ Garcia cat's an interesting ranger. He'll go through pastel sounds like an Ellington here, but there'll also be some passages that just charge through and beat the door down. Fantastic stuff. Great album cover. Tough album to find. And of course, one of the things in this whole series is that what's tough to find today Could change tomorrow, could change 2 weeks from now. For example, there was a record on Argo by Thornell Schwartz, a great guitar player, whose record on Argo I didn't think should be that hard to find, but when I finally needed to fill that number in, I had the toughest time tracking it down. Thornell Schwartz and Bill Leslie, I believe it is, number like 675 or something like that. And I looked for it for the longest time, and obviously Discogs had sold it plenty of times, so I knew it had to be out there. So I finally put it on my Discogs I want this list. Alert me if it shows up. And finally I found one from Europe. And the guy agreed to give it to me for a good price, so I bought it with the shipping. Probably paid about $25-30 including shipping, which isn't bad. But after that record arrived, Discogs alerted me probably 5 or 6 times in the last 5 months, 6 months, that there was one on Discogs for sale for 10, 14, 20 bucks. So what's rare today may not necessarily be rare. A lot of it's just timing. You know, a record can be by an artist that's in high demand today and goes out of favor, and vice versa. A guy could be kind of not very popular, but then he might show up in a film or in some documentary, and suddenly every jazz collector who watches it wants to find that record. So it is a real fluctuation on what's rare right now, what's rare when you're looking for it, what's rare when I found it, what's rare when I bought it. You know, it can really fluctuate. Certain titles are always going to be rare. An example of that is Quadrama, Gil Mel. This is one of his great prestige sessions. He does 3. Gil Mel is a kind of a Blue Note guy. He's at Blue Note in the early 50s doing 10 inches. I think he has 4 of them. He makes his first 12-inch at Blue Note, like number 15, 19 or so. It's a great record on Blue Note. And then he gets hired over to Prestige, where he makes 3 great records. Gil's Guess, Gil's Something, and this one here, of course, Quadrama. And none of those 3 Gil Mel records were reissued OJC. And so that right there is an indicator, A, the initial sales and demand for those records, but B, the fact that OJC didn't reissue them makes them even rarer for a collector to find. And so the Gil Mel stuff, the Blue Note, of course, goes for $1,000, $2,000 sometimes. His Prestige 12 inches fetch $200, $300, $400 for good copies all the time. And they're rare, they're expensive when they do come up. Luckily, most people who did have them were the average kind of jazz collector who's going to take pretty good care of them. This one's got a beautiful, nice, clean seam on it, beautiful shaped jacket. And when I finally had a chance to get this, I bundled it with a few other sessions about 2 years ago, and I think I got it with 2 other records for around $90. And I think I paid probably $70 for this, and then $10 or $15 for a couple other things in a bundle to bring the cost of this one down. And it's a great little session, tough to find, and I'm pretty sure this one's still pretty tough to come by. Gil Mel stuff in general is a pretty tough seek. Next thing I want to show you is a record that is outstanding. It's, as I've probably told you before, it's not officially a Hank Mobley record in the sense of we went into the studio with Hank Mobley as a leader and he picked the tracks and this was his session. This was more of a Savoy blowing session. But Savoy lets a lot of young, entertaining, powerful black musicians into the studio in 1956, and they do 2 records, Jazz Message 1, Jazz Message 2, and they've both kind of since been kind of credited to Hank Mobley, in part because he's the tenor saxophonist, and those guys often will get leadership of sessions over a bass player or a piano player, although Donald Byrd Lee Morgan could have easily been the leader on this, even Hank Jones could have been, but it's a great record. It's tough to come by. It's an old Savoy pressing. Jazz Message 1 is also equally tough to find. Jazz Message 1 and 2 on Savoy are 2 of the most in-demand Savoy titles. And they both fetch $100 to $400 on a regular basis. They're pretty limited. Savoy's reissues function a lot differently. There is the Oxblood, more maroon label versions of these out there, and they go for still $70 to $100. And then even the Japanese titles. I tried to buy this one Japanese a couple times at auction from, I think it was Face Records in Japan, Tokyo, and it starts off like at $2 or something like that, real low. And the day of the auction, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get this thing, and you know shipping's gonna be $25, so you still want to be careful what you bid. And I'll just tell you, in the last 2 minutes, it blew up so far beyond what I wanted to pay. I think it sold for like $118 plus shipping for a Japanese copy of this. And that's discouraging as a collector. You're like, if this record is so in demand that a Japanese reissue will fetch $150 with shipping, how am I going to find one, let alone an original? And for me, that's where I kind of lower my sights a little bit and say, you know what, I want to take one that's a very good plus, maybe very good, and hope for the best. And generally speaking, most sellers will undergrade, not overgrade, because returns are a pain in the ass. And a lot of people who spend good money on records are finicky, kind of little bitchy cunts who will return something for the minutest of flaw. And so most sellers will list everything and overstate its condition. And especially any seller with any kind of long-term reputation and history sales-wise, they're not going to undergrade. They're usually going to be over-conservative. And if it's a very good, it's probably a very good plus. You know, I mean, if it's a very good minus, it's probably a very good. And they'll list the flaws. Anyway, I got this one probably, I think I paid $80 for it. The guy it was very good. I think he wanted $140, and I asked him. We negotiated some. I probably bundled a few things in with this one as well. It's been like 3 years at least now since I've had this. But again, $100's about the most I pay for anything ever, and I'm pretty sure I paid $85 for this, and it sounds great. And I don't think I've even cleaned this one yet. I should probably give it a cleaning, but great stuff. And when you got Mobley, Morgan Bird, Hank Jones, Barry Harris, Doug Watkins, Kenny Clark, and Art Taylor, you can expect nothing but the best, and that's truly what you got. New Jazz is a funky label. It's of course a subsidiary of Prestige, and a lot of New Jazz titles did get the OJC reissue treatment, but for some reason a lot of name players, their stuff didn't get reissued on OJC. From the Prestige 7000 series, the stuff that doesn't get reissued is all second tier names. Gilmel's a second tier name, and he got omitted from OJC's reissue titles. With the New Jazz stuff, some very important artists had titles that weren't reissued on OJC, which is strange. And it's made some of the Gigi Grice and Benny Golson records on New Jazz incredibly expensive, and even the Japanese copies will go for $70, $80, $100. This one was issued on OJC, and let me tell you this as a piece of advice as a collector: don't ever pass up any OJC New Jazz titles. You'll regret it. You'll kick your ass. You'll be mad at yourself for weeks. The original New Jazz pressings are all expensive, and they're all rare. I don't think there's really an exception to that rule. There's, of that first 80 titles on New Jazz, they're just such rare commodities. And the ones that don't get OJC reissue treatment, there's even a few of those that the Japanese don't reissue. And boy, let me tell you that. Those records are through the roof expense-wise. There's one of my most sought-after records right now. And if anybody has a line to this record, let me know. One of the records I'm most seeking out right now is the great flautist Jerome Richardson. His first record, Midnight Oil, was reissued on OJC from New Jazz. His second title, it's got an orange and black cover. I can't find it. I can't find it. The one time I did see one, it was probably $300-400. And I love Jerome Richardson, but I don't love Jerome Richardson enough to get divorced. So, again, we've talked about Art Farmer quite a lot. A real counterpoint to Miles Davis. Beautiful lyrical player. Farmer's Market. This record took me a long time to find, including it being an OJC. It took me a long time to track this down. And that's with the internet. And one of the fun things about what I'm doing here is a lot of my records are getting multiple marks on them. That's the label number 8203, New Jazz. Here it says TF, Tough to Find. Some of my stuff has Throat Grabber on it. Some of my stuff has different, the different series I'm doing. I'm trying to mark records so I know that, okay, I've done this with this, but I've never done, okay. Just so I know what I've used it for. Because I don't want to do the same record with Throat Grabbers 4 times. Who knows? It's hard to keep it all straight. But slowly I'm getting little liner notes on all my album covers, on the plastic sleeve, of course. But it's fun seeing my record collection being filled in with that kind of insight, knowledge, and cross-reference. It's almost like my mom's Bible. All the stuff highlighted and referenced, and arrows and markers and pen underlines, and refer to page this and that. My jazz collection is becoming much more of a biblical canon to me. The deeper I dig, the more I talk about it and share with it, the fresher it all stays in my mind, the more interconnected it all becomes. He's playing with Addison Farmer, his brother, here on bass, with Kenny Drew and Hank Mobley. And Hank Mobley is probably one of the reasons why this is really tough to find. You put Mobley on anything, and it becomes a pretty rare bird and a pricey bird. This is not actually early Prestige 7000 record, and for some reason even the OJC is tough to find, but the originals of this Red Garland record, this is his first solo record, number 7064, and of course he's working with Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and he's laying down the foundation with that great rhythm section with Philly Joe and Paul Chambers, and he's given a contract by Prestige to record piano trio stuff. And some of it expands into quintets, but most of it's piano trio stuff. Most of it's with Art Taylor and Paul Chambers. And I'm on record having said I love all Red Garland stuff, and I do. I love it all. I love piano trio stuff almost always. It's calming, it's cerebral, it's sensual, I love piano music. But this record, the original pressing of this, is tough to find. Even the OJC, which I had first, was a tough thing to come by, and some of the OJCs, the tougher titles, are getting $40, $50, $60 I'm seeing now, which is crazy. This was had by a seller. I already had the OJC. He called the condition probably very good minus or something. It might have even been graded like a good plus, but the price was what I was willing to pay for it. I'm like, oh, he wants $30 for that? I'll take a chance on it. And if you listen to it, there's a little snap crackle in there, a little bit, but this is a piano trio and it's not overwhelming the music at all. Just a soft little, and I need to clean this record as well. I got 13,000 records. I've only cleaned maybe a couple hundred at this point, maybe 400, beautiful stuff. Listen to them. Those are, of course, little pianos sitting there that you can't tell online what that is. You think it's just a little blurb of paint. But tough to find. And even the OJC's gotten really, really hard to come by. And again, some of it's when you happen to be looking. Some of this stuff you could go online right now and be like, oh, I found that Red Garland right now for $40. And that's how it works. A lot of it's timing. Some titles are going to be rare no matter when you look, and that would be the case for these next two. The great Sonny Sitt, who for my money is one of the most underappreciated guys in today's jazz collector's canon. He's absolutely an integral part and a huge bridge on the saxophone between the blues era players, the bebop era players, and then into the modern post-bop era. He's there through all of that. He's got all of those sounds in his playing If you're a fan of Dexter Gordon, if you're a fan of Ben Webster, if you're a fan of Charlie Parker, he can play a ballad with the best of them. And believe me when I tell you, this guy can swing up tempo harder than anybody. They called him the Lone Wolf because he never really settled down with one working group. He's got periods where he's playing with certain people for a little while, but he never really had that established recording group or touring group. He pretty much was a gun assassin for hire. He does have a working arrangement with Gene Ammons where they'll do some sets together here and there and some albums together, but he just never really settled down into one group. And on top of that, he doesn't really settle on one label for very long. And it might seem deceiving when you look at his discography and his body of work. You're like, what are you saying? He's got 15 Roost records. And that's true. But they all run from 54 to about 56. And Roost just kept putting everything they had out by him long after he left. He's not there very long. And the same thing goes for when he goes to Verve. He goes to Verve Records in 1957. And 57, 58, he makes probably 20 records for Verve in a 3-year period. It's prolific how some of these guys record. I think he had a pretty big habit for some of that time frame, which probably drove him somewhat to being a prolific recorder, to getting that money in his pocket. But there's a kind of a desperation and a bit of a loneliness even in his playing. He's a powerful kid. He moves on eventually to Argo, where he makes a lot of great records there as well. He actually has 2 stints at Argo, one in like 57 where he makes 2 records, and then he goes to Verve for a while, and he comes back to Argo in the early 60s and makes another great string of records, including some stuff with Benny Green that's outstanding, some stuff with Gene Ammons, of course. But these 2 10 inches by Sonny Stitt, I was working on completing the 400 series of Roost, and there's about 24 10 inches in the Roost series, and I have probably about 18 of them now, maybe 17. But these 2 Sonny Stitt records were among the ones I really wanted to get badly. You know, like, I want these 2 records. And I found the Jazz at the Hi-Hat one fairly quickly, and I think I probably paid $40, $50 for it. And it's a great session, great art. Love that 50s styling. I think it's a Burt Goldblatt cover, and indeed it is. And then this one, I believe it's actually earlier, yeah, three issues earlier. Sonny Stitt, the arrangement of Johnny Richards. And this is also a Burt Goldblatt cover. And you can look at it this way, or you can look at it that way. But I think the opening is right there, so I think it's supposed to be that way. This one took me a long time to find. Online for a couple $100, but that's beyond what I wanted to pay for it. Again, I don't really go over, if it's over 100, 120 bucks, I usually won't even make an offer. You know, 150 is probably the highest thing I've even ever made an offer on, but that's because I thought I could get that thing for a half of what they're asking. And that's the thing about it. If someone wants $150 for a record, and it's a Miles Davis record, good luck. They know someone's going to buy it. But if it's a rare artist that they're asking a lot for, like that Lou Waters, they want 150 for that, ask them, offer them 60, because no one's looking for that. No one wants that. No one's trying to buy that. And the guys who are buying it, the old Dixieland heads, are dying. They're selling their records, not buying records. So you gotta put some common sense into what you try to negotiate. And if you know the title you're looking for is kind of a label filler, it's something that nobody else even really knows about or is looking for, and Discogs has hardly ever sold it, if a seller has that for a high number, it's always worth saying, you know what, I'll give you half of what you're asking for. I know no one's even made you an offer on that before. And what's the worst they can say? They can say, no, I've had a lot of interest in this, and lie. Which, you know, and that could be the case. Maybe they have a lot of interest in it, I don't know. But for the most part, like I said, it's a place where you can get a great deal. And I finally found this one in the other one in Sweden, I believe, and the guy sold it to me, including shipping, for about $38. So I feel like I got a great deal on that one. So sometimes you just gotta be patient and wait. And being obsessive compulsive as I am, I never stop looking. If something's a gap that I want to fill in my collection from my label discography, I'll keep searching for that. Every time I get that itch, I'm like, oh, is that out there now? And I'll go look. And I did that for all those labels. I was always like, oh, there's an Argo I'm missing. There's one Argo right now I'm trying to find. Cesar Giovannini, the piano player, Holiday on the Riviera, it's called. Number like 651 or something like that. It's the only 600 series Argo I don't have. It's just a piano player, Italian guy. It's probably not even super jazzy. And Discogs has never sold it. I saw it on eBay. I made a low bid on it a couple weeks back, and it sold for $1 more than I offered. So I probably should have gone a little higher, but it's something that's out there in a record store for $5. You know, if that's in a physical record store, that thing's not going to be. That's one of the things you got to look and remember, is that a lot of things online are unrealistic. You know, you'll know that I shopped in stores for years, and this title wasn't going for that. You know, that perspective is always nice to have. I want to show you these two records as well. Two more new jazz titles, 8240 and 8222. The Modern Jazz Disciples. And they're bluesy cats. They're out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Fantastic album covers. Again in the New Jazz series. Again, OJC never touched these two records, so they are rare pieces. They're pretty anonymous name-wise. It's not going to be like, oh, that's where so-and-so is from. They're pretty unknown. We got Curtis Piegler, William Kelly, Billy Brown, Lee Tucker, and William Slim Jackson. And these two records are great. Obviously, it's a bit of a play on the Jazz Messengers. They're not quite as hard driving as the Jazz Messengers, but they're very blues driven. Kind of a ballad, mid-tempo blues. And there's kind of an up-tempo one that would be almost Jazz Messenger-like right there. So the Jazz Disciples are great. Again, tough to find. It took me a while to track both of these down. And I've really enjoyed both of them immensely, to be honest. I don't listen to them enough. But, and you could go on Craigslist right now, not Craigslist, but Discogs, and maybe these will be on there for $30 right now. I'm not sure. I've had these for a couple years, so I don't know. But like I said, these were both tough for me to come by. And when I have seen them in other sellers' stores, they are still priced fairly high. But I don't think there's a lot of new jazz stuff out there that's going for cheap. I really don't. So those two Modern Jazz Disciple records are fun and definitely worth tracking down. The last thing I want to show you is a record I found in the wild probably 2 years ago. And I had low expectations for it, to be honest. But I was kind of blown away by it. It's this great Oscar Peterson Sings 10-inch. It's on Clef. And my friend Jean-Michel Reeser Beethoven told me that when he put this out, Oscar was considered a piano player of the time, and Nat Cole was considered kind of the singer. And Nat was shaking his boots when he heard Oscar sing. He's like, you're going to kill all my sets if you start being the better player and the better singer. And he can really sing. And so they made a gentleman's agreement of sorts, where Nat Cole would concentrate on the singing, and Oscar would concentrate on the playing, and they'd go their separate paths, sales-wise, for commercial success reasons. And they honored that agreement until Nat Cole dies, and then he does a record of singing again, singing Nat Cole songs. So they kept that gentleman's agreement for a couple decades, of maybe 15 years, which is pretty impressive. But it's a beautiful record. I found this in a little bookstore, used record store in in Illinois, in Rockford. And I had been in there a number of times, and bought a lot of titles, but I had always kind of forgotten to go through the 10-inch titles. And when I did go through the 10 inches on my third or fourth visit, I found this. I found a couple cool Ellington 10 inches, and they were pretty underpriced. 10 inches, because there's less people looking for them, they're more likely to slip through the cracks in terms of what you will pay for them. But it's still a tough record to find. I've looked online a couple times, and there's not a lot of these out there. It's beautiful. It's just a gorgeous collection.
Shimmering clouds.
It's a record I played a lot at my Sunday brunch, Saturday brunch gig. It was just a perfect record to have dangle over a crowd of people eating breakfast and drinking mimosas. Wonderful stuff. It does have some tape on it, but I don't care about that. I'd rather have one with tape for 30 than one without tape for 100. So that wraps up this version of T2F, Tough to Find. In the comments, share with me some of your tough to find experiences. And being that I've been searching mostly for the main jazz label stuff, there's not going to be a lot of really super rare stuff. Some of those avant-garde records that were on little small labels, that stuff gets even tougher to start coming by. Even stuff on like the debut label or Candid, some of that stuff can be really hard to find and rare. And it's even more so for ESP and some of those record labels that were putting out Albert Island and some of that stuff. Some of that stuff's really hard to come by. But there's plenty of Riversides and Argos that took me a long time to track down. A long time. And we'll probably do another version of this at some point, depending on what you guys thought of it. Hope you all enjoyed it. Remember, there's Jazz Shepherd merchandise available at my store. You'll see it in the credits. There's also Jazz Vinyl Club, my Facebook jazz group. Merchandise available as well, hoodies and t-shirts. Some of them are my own design, some of my friends Sven and Hoydunk. It's great merch. Help share the love of jazz with people. And then, of course, to all you Patreon subscribers, thank you very much. We'll try to add some more content there real quickly. And if you haven't subscribed to Patreon, donate $5 a month to help support me and my family and help us get through this tough time. I'm on unemployment. I hate asking for money, but I do put my heart and soul into this channel. I've worked hard on this year. I put 30, 40, 50 hours a week into this channel between research and editing and just recording myself and trying to respond to people. I try to be as interactive as I can. So again, if you enjoy the channel, throw some feedback my way and maybe throw a few bucks to Patreon or buy a hoodie. Appreciate you all. Be safe. My name is Dan. Talk to you soon.